you, David, really. For those of us who aren't here tonight, this will be important. All right. So we're doing green screen and motion tracking tonight, at least rudimentarily. All right, so we have a shot. We've already talked. There's some things in it that we got to deal with, right? We've got the light over here on the side that we're going to have to mask out. We've got blue tracking dots in the back that we're going to have to figure out how to get rid of. We've also got an idiot wearing a green jumpsuit on a green screen. So we need to work around the green jumpsuit on the green screen. So there's some things we're going to have to do. So I just said, you know, most of the students in here at some point have had to do some type of keying. Maybe there's a few that haven't, which is fine. And I'm guessing that when you've done this keying, it's been pretty like drag, drop, get it set so it looks decent, and we're done, right? Most of you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we're going to kind of talk about the really nitty-gritty proper way to do chroma key, right? So that usually involves an inside mask, an outside mask, and any kind of masking or roto work that you need to make sure everything comes out nice and clean. So that will just get rid of the light problem. It may get rid of a lot of our tracking dots problems, things like that that we need to deal with. And we're going to do some motion tracking work as well. And for this particular one, we're going to try a couple things. I think we'll try the camera tracking and see what happens. But we're also going to use the standard simple motion trackers and set those up so that we can get approximated motion for something like a 3D background that we could put in behind this footage. Okay, so we looked at the shot. It's about 3 seconds long. A couple things that you'll notice here is we've got some crazy time stuff going on, right? So when I took the shot and dragged it and made a new composition out of it, I've got some weird time code going on. So my camera dumps time code on the footage when it's rolling it. It like just generates time code and dumps it. So what you're seeing is the time code generation of the camera. So it's 3 hours, 52 minutes, 19 seconds, and 4 frames. Let's fix that straight away. So let's go into the composition settings for this comp and change that so that it's zeroed out. So you can see the start time code is set to 3:52:19:04. Let's just set that to 0. It'll make it a little easier to kind of tell where we're at. I don't need to say, okay, at 3 whatever. We'll just make it simple. And it says the duration. Okay, it's 6.5 seconds, or 6 seconds, 5 frames long, whatever. Sorry? Yep, just change that start time code to 0 and then click OK. And now we've got a nice
frame rate. It's kind of just shy of 24.
Yep, 23,976. So the camera that I shoots at 23,976, not a solid 24. It's a drop frame basically. Okay, so we got a 6 second 5 frame shot. I basically trimmed this down so that we really only had what we needed to make the character work. And now we can go in and we can start playing around with making the shot key. So let's do, I think what we'll do first is we'll do the motion tracking first. So when we do motion tracking on a shot like this, we really need to utilize all the data that the camera can give us, right? So that data can come from the light, it can come from the blue trackers in the background, it can come from the kind of slash on the left-hand side where the green screen kind of leaves some gap there at the edge of the frame. There are motion trackers actually on some of the C-stands that we have back there that aren't really in the scene. But let's just, because the camera movement in this is relatively simple, I think what we're going to do is we're going to use the blue track dots in the background. If we were doing something where we wanted the camera tracking to really take effect, we could do a camera track, but that's kind of a drag and drop scenario, and I want to go over how to properly use the motion tracking that's inside of After Effects. So let's start there. Let's just because make a duplicate of this footage. So Command D to duplicate it. We'll shut the other layer off and just leave it on the bottom, and we can come back and reference it later if we need to once we start playing around with keys and all this good stuff. All right, so let's do the motion track first. So you can motion track in a couple ways. You can right-click on the footage itself, and you can say track motion. Or you can go up to the tabs at the top, and you can say animation, track motion. That's another way to do it. Or there's the tracker palette over on the right-hand side, which will allow you to track the motion as well. So let's go ahead and say track motion. And what it's going to do is it's going to take you out of the composition tab. You can see now we're out of the composition tab and we're in a layer tab, which has our 6-second 5-frame footage on it, but it also has a track point on it. We are going to kind of go all the way with this tracker right out of the gate, and we're going to say we want to track rotation and scale as well. So in that tracker palette, make sure you've got position, rotation, and scale all selected. So what this is going to do is it's going to give you two little motion tracking windows, right? So now instead of one box, which we had when it was just position, we've got two. And that second box allows After Effects to figure out scale and rotation and anything crazy that's happening within the frame. Okay, is everybody ready? All right, let's, we'll track the background first. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these blue motion tracking dots in the background to track our motion. But let's look and see which ones are available the whole time. And it looks like those two in the upper right-hand corner are available to us the whole time. Same with the two on the left. I'm going to pick the two on the right-hand side just because I think they pop a little bit better. Their edges are nice and clean. And I think the trackers will pick them up really well. So let's talk a little bit about what the trackers actually are. So click on these little boxes and just kind of move them around and scale them up a little bit so that you can actually see what they're doing. So whenever you're working in high resolution footage like 4K footage, those tracking boxes come in itty bitty little tiny versions, and we want to blow them up just a little bit so you guys can actually see what we're working with. So we got track point 1, we got track point 2. Everybody's with me, right? Everybody's got two trackers, they're blown up, you can see the boxes, move them around, etc., etc. You can see track point 1, track 2. Everybody's good, right? Okay, moving forward. So let's talk about how the tracker actually works, right? So this is how the trackers work. The inside box is the feature center, right? It's what After Effects is looking at to actually track. The outside box is the look ahead box. So that look ahead box means that for every frame that After Effects is trying to track, it's looking ahead inside that box to see where the feature center is going to be in the next frame, right? So how big should these boxes be? Blah, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of kind of questions that go along with figuring that out. The feature center box should be as small as you can make it so that it's got detail in it, right? So in the case of working with these tracking dots, I'm going to take track 2 and I'm going to move it over and kind of shrink it down and kind of center it right on this blue dot. And I'm going to punch in here too. And I'm just using my mouse wheel to punch in. So if you scroll over where you want to zoom in, you can kind of zoom in and we can fine tune where this box is. Now notice that I'm leaving a border around the edge of the blue and the green. So generally the way that these trackers work is they work on luminance, which is what? Anybody know? Black and white, basically, right? We talked about like luma matting when we were talking about track matting. That uses black and white. So usually the trackers use luminance. In this case, we don't want to use luminance. We actually want to use the RGB values so that it can designate, okay, this is green and this is blue. I'm paying attention to the little blue box, right? And then the feature center, or the look ahead box on the outside. Ideally, what you want to do is you want that box to be big enough so that any motion that happens in the following frames stays within that box, right? So if that blue dot moved outside the look ahead box, the track would get lost. It wouldn't know where to go next. So it needs to be big enough to look ahead to make sure that it can see where that box is going to be in the next frame. So if we kind of just toggle, oh, and I kind of made a mistake here. I'm starting at the end, by the way. Are you guys all starting at the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. You can start at the beginning. It's just going to change the way whether you analyze the footage forwards or backwards, right? Sometimes it does matter where you start. Ideally, you want to start in a place that's going to give you the most data. We're tracking the whole 6-second shot. So I'm starting at the end. I can quickly change that so that we're all starting in the same place. All right, so I'm just going to start at the beginning. and set my tracker up basically the same. So I'm just going to kind of look around here and see, you know, how much kind of leeway I have with this feature center, and it looks like it's going to be plenty big. So I'm going to shrink this down a little bit, and we can change the size of the look-ahead box and the feature center boxes kind of on the fly as we track through the footage. So if the track gets lost, we can back up, we can change things around a little bit so that we can get as much out of this as possible. All right, so go ahead, Jesse.
A little plus sign separated from your tracking box.
Why is it?
Now I got a solid line. I don't have that little box yet.
Okay, so if that happens, what I would recommend you do is delete the motion tracker and start again, because it can be a little tricky. So there are reasons that you want to move the plus out of the boxes.
Yeah, mine just decided to...
Right, you can drag it back into the center. Okay. So the plus is actually like what is being keyframed, right? So whatever motion is created for the null object, that will be where the keyframe is, or where the position data is generated for the next part of the key, or of the track, sorry. I don't want to go too crazy with this. We'll kind of set this up and go, and if we run into any issues, we'll address them. Reasons that you'd want to move that plus around. Let's say you have a tracking marker. You're shooting a subject, but the subject takes up a lot of the frame, and you have tracking markers that come on and off the screen, right? So if you have tracking markers that come on and off the screen, but you want to create one continuous long tracking piece of tracking data, you can move your feature centers and things around, and that plus will stay and just adjust as you move things around to different trackers. So there's ways to kind of like utilize the motion tracker to create a piece of seamless data, even though you're using multiple trackers in the same shot. Like, let's say we're doing a big pan, right? And we got tons of tracking markers going through the shot. We'd want to be adjusting those feature centers and stuff so that we get one long contiguous piece of data to create the pan out of. That would be a for instance. We don't have that problem here. So we've got the first one set up. Do the same thing with the second one, but put it on the dot just to the left. Right? So I'm tracking 1 point over here and 1 point over here. And that's going to provide us with the scale and rotation data that we're going to need to kind of match the background. Same type of thing, like make sure you leave some border around your box, and then just kind of adjust the scale of those two look-ahead boxes so that they're as small as we can really get them, but we don't lose the track. And we're going to know right away whether or not we made the right decisions when we start tracking forward. Is everybody with me? Is anything unclear? Anything that I've said? I know the kind of whole like what's the plus thing is a little convoluted at this point, but it's really based on context. And in this context, we won't really have to worry about it. Everybody ready to move forward? All right, here we go. So at this point, we're pretty much ready to start tracking the shot and creating data. So let's go ahead and just push the play forward button. So in the palette over here, let's just talk a little bit about the palette really quick. You've got your different options for types of tracker, right? So you can track the camera, which makes this tracker completely different than what we're doing right now. You can use warp stabilizer, which is pretty good for like taking shake out of footage. You can use track motion, which is what we're doing now, and you can use stabilize motion, which is kind of a reverse motion tracker. So what it does is it looks at the footage, you track it, and then it pulls all that position data to stabilize the footage. So it's a good way to help you stabilize shaky stuff if the warp stabilizer is not working for you. We did not, thank you. Yes, so we need to switch to RGB. So in the options tab, we'll pull up the options for this. You can see that the tracker plugin is the one that we're using for After Effects, the built-in one, but it's looking at luminance, right? So, which is darkness and lightness. And if we looked at this in black and white, my guess is the blue and the green would basically look like the same luminance. So instantaneously, After Effects is going to get lost because it's not going to know what to look at. So let's set this to RGB, and then it'll be looking at the red, green, and blue channels to generate tracking data with. Which is perfect because we've got two totally opposite colors, green and blue, at least in the world of RGB values. They're basically night and day to each other. So this should work really well. I'm not going to mess with any of this other stuff, and I'll be honest with you, I don't really know what it all does. Enhance before match, track fields, blah, 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 blah. All that good stuff. You can leave it stock for this. It's going to work just fine. So set channel to RGB, and we can move forward. Go ahead and click OK. Everybody ready? All right, now we're going to hit the play button. So down here on the analyze keys, we've got a couple options. We've got step forward, which basically moves one frame at a time. And then we've got the play key, which just keeps on moving forward or backward, tracking footage and generating data as we go. Go ahead, Anna. The option key is right here on the palette, the tracker palette. Got it? Go ahead, Cameron.
Would we want to make for a motion target?
Sorry?
Motion target?
We can do the null afterwards.
Oh, okay.
But yes, we are going to create a null object to dump all of this data onto.
Okay. Are there some cases where it's better to not have one? I may have asked that before, but...
Yeah, if you're using like stabilized motion, you want it to actually be applied directly to the footage because you want it to move the footage around and take the stabilize the footage basically. So it wouldn't really work to use a null there.
Okay.
There's other instances where you may want to like put the data on a layer solid, but generally if you export to a null, you can utilize the data in a lot of different ways. All right, everybody's ready to step forward and do this thing? All right, so let's just push the play button. We'll just have it analyze forward and go through the footage as far as it goes. If things get lost or whatever, just push stop and we'll back up and go forward. We should all get pretty similar results. Here's another thing to just know about how motion tracking works. The larger your boxes are, the longer the track is going to take. Because After Effects is looking at all of the pixels inside that next frame box to see where things are at. So the bigger that is, the longer it's going to take. So you kind of want to make things as small as you possibly can so that it tracks quickly and accurately. All right, let's go. Let's do this. So here we go. We're going to hit the play button and we're going to start moving forward. And you might want to just hover over that stop button just in case things get crazy. It looks like things are really on point right now, which is good. I stopped mine, but that's okay. You guys can keep going. We might get lucky and it'll just go through the whole thing. There's not a ton of movement in here. So we should be in good shape.
Oh, Harry, go to the start of your timeline. Yeah, you don't have your... You have to make the start of your timeline to start your motion track. So, like, put it right there. Grab this other one.
Anybody have any issues?
Put it on.
It's just rocking and rolling, right? Excellent. That's exactly what we want. It's almost too easy. All right, everybody got track data? Went through the whole shot, no stops? Is anybody still rendering? Few of them? Okay, cool. So that being, you can probably stop, shrink those look-ahead boxes down a little bit, and it'll speed things up. So to do that, you just click the stop button. You can change the size of those boxes, and then push play and keep on cruising. All right, let me know when you're done, those of you in the back who had a few things that you were waiting for. Those of you who have data, let's go ahead and make a new null, okay? So that would be layer. Everybody's good? Awesome. So let's make a null object. So layer, new, null object, and you'll see that null pop in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to apply the data that we've just generated to that null object. So everybody's got a null? Connor? A null object. So you're going to go layer, new, null object. My menu tabs are on the other screen for whatever reason, so you can't see it. So layer, new, null object. And then what we're going to do is we're going to apply the data to the null object. So we're going to go back into the tracker tab where it says edit target. We're going to click that edit target button. And then it's going to ask if we want to put it on a layer, which we do, and we're going to go ahead and select that null object. So null 1, or if you named it, whatever you named your null object. If you have multiple things that you're tracking, it would be a good idea to name your nulls, like a hand null or whatever, if you're tracking somebody's hand or eye or whatever. Okay, everybody ready? Everybody's got their null selected. Okay, so go ahead and click OK. Make sure your current time indicator is back at 0. So one of the things you want to make sure of, and I don't know if they've changed this, I know on old After Effects, it would apply the data to wherever your current time indicator was set. So like, let's say that my CTI was at 3 seconds. If I go ahead and click Apply Data, it's going to put the starting data at 3 seconds on out, right? Which doesn't match our footage. They may have fixed it, but I don't think they have. Go ahead, Damien.
So I have my null, but did you do something to it?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
The only thing we did was we made sure that the tracker target was set to that null object.
Okay.
So in your tracker palette, click Edit Target and set it to the null object. And then make sure that your current time indicator is set at 0 or at the beginning of your comp, whatever. Everybody with me?
Yep.
Cool beans. All right. So then all we got to do is apply it. So go ahead and click the Apply key. It's going to ask you what dimensions you want to apply to. Yes, we want to use X and Y, and it's going to apply all of said data to the null object. And you can see now our null object has a whole bunch of keyframes on it for position, scale, and rotation, which is exactly what we want. And if we go ahead and select our null object and kind of scrub across, you can see that our null object is nice and fixed to the tracking points that we have in the back. There's some very, very subtle rotation, not very much. And now we should have really good, solid background track, which is exactly what we want. Everybody good? Cool. Don't actually edit the null, you edit the track.
Or you can just screw yourselves.
Oh. It was a scammer. Was it a scammer?
Oh, yeah.
Was it fighting words, Barry? I like the fire.
Double click that.
Sometimes you
There.
gotta let 'em know.
I tried blocking like target.
Yeah, they just changed the numbers slightly and then
You don't say yes.
Oh,
Pick up.
Go.
They record it, so then they have a recording of you saying yes, and they can just like, manipulate it
And you're good.
to make it sound like you answered the question.
Everybody good? Jesse? Okay, so if you got your data, test it. Make a piece of text, and then parent the text to the null object, and make sure that it moves around just like the background does.
That's fine. That's what it's supposed to do.
Exactly right.
Create a solid tracker.
Like scrub over it.
Text.
Always like
Did the test work?
Let's see.
Were you able to set it up that quick?
Oh, the text is moving around there.
Yeah, it is.
Text is moving around there. All right, good stuff.
Some people do that.
All right. So I'll do this really quick so those of you who didn't get a chance to see it can see it. All right, so the way I like to test my motion trackers is generally just with a piece of text. So I'll just type some text on here, hit return, scale it up a little bit, and then parent it at 0 to the null. And then play it and make sure that it matches the background, which it does.
5, 6.
Beautiful.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Everybody good?
2,
Shayla, you good?
3, 4,
Okay,
5,
cool.
6.
All right, so that's the first type of motion tracker. And I'm just kind of generally interested in what might happen if we camera track this. So I think we're going to run through that too. If we don't get to keying tonight, that's not the end of the world. We can work on that next week. All right, so let's give that a shot as well. So we've got the null object, we've got the text. The track worked great for tracking that part of the green screen. But obviously there's a little more to this shot than just what the motion trackers are going to give us, right? A camera track is probably going to give us a better approximation of all this motion, but it's a little more complicated. So let's take that second layer of video that we had. So we got the duplicate. Let's Click on that first layer of video. And then let's right click and say track camera. And then what's going to happen is you're going to get this blue bar that goes across your stuff. Let's look through this here real quick. I don't know if I can stop this with caps lock. Okay, just let it do its thing, right? It says it's initializing it. Hopefully it'll actually do what it's supposed to do. Let's go in and look at a couple things. So the camera tracker is really kind of nice because it automatically does its stuff. Like, it looks at your footage, it finds areas of contrast that it can use to track, and it kind of creates a whole bunch of tracking dots for you, and will approximate or build a camera that fits your shot.
The blue bar, but the tab is open.
No blue bar.
there we
Make
go.
sure you're in the
19%,
composition.
Time remaining 1 minute.
Yep, composition tab.
Don't see blue bar.
Then you want to right click your footage in a timeline. Go down to track camera. Yep. There you are. And it's done.
All right, so one of the things, we'll let it do its thing first and see what happens. There's some stuff in here you can kind of muck around with if it doesn't work out. Generally, whenever I track anything this way, I like to use the detailed analysis mode. Don't click it, otherwise it'll start analyzing all over again. David, did you have a question?
Sorry, can you explain again what the difference is between tracking the camera and tracking like an object?
Okay, so the camera tracker is obviously going to look at your footage and it's going to generate a 3D camera for you,
Okay.
right? So it's making something out of your footage for replicating a camera. And there are tons and tons of different ways to use this. You wouldn't use the camera tracker to track, say, like my wrench. Like if you wanted to put text over my wrench, you would use, you know, Mocha's planar tracker for that, or you'd use the motion trackers for that, or some other type of tracker to track an object. All right, so it did indeed do something with my footage. It doesn't look like it really did a very good job. And I kind of figured it's a very flat scene, and there's not a lot of contrast elements in here to work with. So this is definitely one that I would do the detailed analysis on. Yeah, I just clicked it. I don't know if this is going to track really well. So the camera tracker in After Effects loves contrast. Like, there's no option for us to go in and change the way that it looks at the footage to have it work on like RGB values or whatnot. Go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, so under solve method, I just clicked on it. It says auto detect typical, mostly flat scene and tripod pan. Since you said there's not a lot of motion going on, it's just basically panning around. Should we do mostly flat scene? Would that help?
I would say tripod pan, actually.
pan?
Yep,
Okay.
because it is on a tripod and we're just panning left and right a little bit.
Okay.
That might help it figure out what it's supposed to do. The other thing that it does, that the camera tracker in After Effects does, is it tracks everything. So me moving around, and because there's a lot of contrast on me, like little points of contrast, it's going to be putting tracking points all over me as I'm moving. And so this is one of the challenges with using the camera tracker in After Effects, is you have to go in and delete out all the extraneous points that you don't need to generate data, right? So any of those tracking dots that get made on my character, we got to go in and take those out, because we don't want the camera to be tracking my motion. We want it to be tracking like the light on the left-hand side, all the blue tracking dots, etc., but nothing on me, because that's just going to throw everything off and it's going to generate a weird camera if that happens. Like I was saying, After Effects likes contrast. So if you're going to use this effect, it really works well like for shooting outdoor scenes, for instance, right? Like generating tracking data in an outdoor scene where the camera's maybe moving on a movie or something like that. It works really well for things like that, but you still need to go in and kind of take out certain parts of the data that you don't want to use. Like if somebody's walking through the frame or a car drives by or something like that happens, it can muck up everything. All right, so we got a few more nodes here. Go ahead, David.
You said it didn't do a good job. What were you looking for to know if it did a good job or not?
First of all, tracking points, right? So you can see I've got a few down here, these little X's, right? I'm going to increase the tracking point size so I can really see them. So you can see, like I said, it's already creating tracking markers on me as I move forward. But fortunately, yep, you can see all this crap on my shoulder. All that stuff is just junk. We don't need any of it. Oh, and then we lose a bunch of nodes too and the camera starts moving. Yeah, this is really not going to work. I can tell you that right now. Like, it should be using this light over here on the left-hand side. So if this is something where I really wanted to use a camera tracker here, ideally I would bring in like some black C-stands and put some big black and white tracking markers on it, like the little triangle ones you see in the lower left-hand corner, that it's creating some wonderful tracking points on. I'm just going to shut off my tracking points so that you can see what I'm talking about. So like these down here, these little triangle box circle things with all the contrast on them, those work really well for camera tracking. So like if I really wanted to use the camera tracker on this scene, I would probably go in, set up some C-stands outside of the range of motion that I'm making and put a bunch of those tracking markers on it so that the camera tracker had a lot of stuff with high contrast to latch onto so that it could create good solid tracking marks. As it stands right now, we've got a whole boatload of tracking marks on me because it's where all the contrast is, and a few over here on the left and nothing on our screen. So you can see, like, trying to track a flat green screen really just doesn't work very well. Because this isn't going to work very well, I'm not going to beleaguer the point. This is something that you guys can use. If I did want to go through and try to make this work, the next step for me would be going in and selecting all these markers that don't work as they crop up. So I'm kind of just stepping through the footage, and then anything like this that I see that pops up on me, I just get rid of all of it. So I'm just selecting it using the mouse and deleting it. Oh shoot, did I actually delete the tracker? I did, okay. Alright, stepping through. I'm going to run this through and just see if it actually works. You kind of got to be patient, because it will literally generate new, fresh tracking markers for every frame. So you have to kind of step through the footage, delete a bunch of junk out. What's up? I don't think so. I know the whole show is on there.
The sign one I did.
Oh, I love this. This is awesome. It just keeps on generating new tracking data for me.
But that one, you could show that one. That one's really cool how that one turned out.
Oh, the camera track on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
With the reflection in the water and stuff.
Yep, so as I'm stepping through this, you can see that my little character here is almost its own worst enemy.
That keeps generating new tracking points.
Yep, it just generates new tracking points for my character motion that we aren't going to use. So again, I'm just stepping through this footage and deleting out all of the tracking marks that pop in on my person, because we can't use any of them.
Well, I didn't get any tracking points on the light.
Did you do the detailed analysis thing?
Yes.
Okay. Try scaling up your tracking points so that you can see them a little better. So track point size, scale those up. I'm interested to see if this is actually going to work.
Yeah, why are you deleting them? Because I've just never selected them.
Whenever, so I'm moving contrary to the camera, right? I just want the camera motion. I don't want I don't want my motion.
Is it important that you get every single one off that's on you, or if like one is left over, it's not a big deal?
Because I thought it was.
It's not the end of the world if there's a couple little ones. So one of the things that you're trying to do is you see the average error. You want to get that as close to like 1 pixel or less as possible. So right now it's pretty high. It's at like 4 pixels, which means your camera has a plus or minus 4 pixel accuracy rating, basically. So in taking out all the extraneous data, you're gonna see that You're gonna see that that average error decrease as we move through the footage, or at least you should see it decrease. And this shot there's really just not much for After Effects to work with here. So I just don't think this is gonna be very solid no matter what I do. Yeah, it's down to 3 now, which isn't terrible. Alright, so I'm gonna just have this thing make a camera and see what happens. So I went through, deleted out all the pixels. I do have a pretty high average error of 3 pixels, which I'm not super duper happy about, but it is what it is. So let's do this. I'm through it. I'm gonna go ahead and create a camera and we're gonna see what happens. So I created a camera, and the camera is basically the best interpolation that After Effects can come up with of what the camera's doing in the scene. So we're gonna test it out. I'm gonna go ahead and throw a piece of text, and to do this, there's a kind of handy way to do this. So if you click on your camera tracker, you'll notice when you kind of like scroll in between trackers, that it gives you this giant target, right? So these targets can be used to create elements in certain spaces within the image, right? And they work kind of in a full 3D realized space of the shot. Again, this is something that works much better when you have more contrast in the image. So I'm gonna right click with one of these big targets up, and I'm gonna say create text. And it did create a piece of text, but it's super tiny. And it's pinwheeling. Oh, we'll see what happens.
Create text in camera?
You don't need the camera. If you created the camera already, you won't need the camera. If you didn't create the camera, I think it killed it.
Need the video stuff. I got the video stuff. It's you. Chicken is messaging me. Isn't it Todd at Winter State?
I think it's it's Todd at Winter State, and then I think it's Winter.
I know the past one. I just don't know.
Todd at Winter State Entertainment.
That's all it is.
Todd at Winter State Entertainment.com. Yeah, it's dead. It died.
You should show him the stuff I did, because that's what I did for all the Daya stuff.
Boo. Save early and often, folks. Yeah, I'll show him that. That's a good idea. Did you guys get it to work on yours?
Yeah.
Did the text actually stick?
Yeah.
Does it actually look like the camera shot it?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, then you get it, right? This was really not the best way to show you that, but I'm glad it worked for some people. When you do it properly, you should be able to get like a sub 1 pixel error, and then it's really going to look fantastic. And you can use those different targets at different depths to kind of create areas where you can pop text in behind objects, or in the background, or in the foreground, depending on what you want to do. Go ahead, Luke.
So what happens with all those tracker points that disappear? Because we can pair something to that, right? But
if you delete them, they're gone.
But what happens if some of them randomly generate midway through the scene? What if you put text on there? Will the text be there at the beginning of the scene as well?
It basically creates text from wherever it thinks those points are in 3D space, and will leave them. The text will remain there for the whole shot, right?
It just won't be as accurate unless the tracking points are okay.
Right, exactly. You got it. Okay, so open After Effects back up.
It's also good to use multiple.
Okay, so we're gonna key our footage. Keylight is the keying plugin that we want to use. It's native to After Effects. It's got a lot of it works pretty well. There's a lot of little facets to it. We'll go over that right now. So let's go ahead and take Keylight and drop it on our footage layer, and then you'll see Keylight 1.2 open up in the effects control panel. Everybody's with me? Yes? Okay. So the kind of let's just step through some of this stuff and talk a little bit about how Keylight works. So the first thing you kind of need to know about is the different views, right? So right now it says reviewing the final result. We haven't actually keyed anything yet, so we'll do that first. Let's go ahead and grab our screen color. That's kind of the first step that you're going to take whenever you use Keylight. So screen color, we're going to use the eyedropper, and then I like to get right next to the subject that I'm keying and grab the green from right next to where my subject is. Obviously, the flatter and smoother your green screen is or blue screen is, the better this is all going to work out. You're going to have less shadow detail and things like that in there that you're going to have to work around. So right now, Keylight is actually keying most of that green screen to transparent. Now we'll go and we'll check out the different views. So right now we're viewing the final result. So this is what Keylight's giving us as the final result with no input in terms of the parameters. Let's step through the views. So we got final results. You can look at the source alpha, which we don't have anything on. The corrected source, which kind of helps you understand some things. Most of the views that I use are screen matte, which gives you the actual matte that Keylight is using to generate the transparency. Screen matte, intermediate result, which gives you the result before taking out any of the spill or anything like that. And then final result are the ones that I use the most. So source, screen matte, intermediate result, and final result. A lot of these other things are just kind of informational, and I won't lie to you again, like I don't know every single tiny little thing about everything Keylight. I just know what I've used in the past to do successful green screen keying.
Sorry, what did you say intermediate result does?
Intermediate result is basically like it mattes the footage but doesn't do any like spill reduction or anything like that, and I actually like to use intermediate result and then the advanced spill suppressor in combo with each other rather than letting Keylight do the spill suppression. Both ways will work. I just like the advanced spill suppressor because I think it does a better job of pulling spill off of subject than Keylight's inherent spill suppressor does. Alright, so that being said, let's start kind of working through Keylight. So we've got the screen color, that's where you grab your color. The screen gain will increase the like black-white value or like start pulling some more of the green color from the image. So you can see right away, like if I start playing with screen gain, this detail up here in the upper left-hand corner starts to disappear. The key gets a little sharper, cleaner. If I pull that out, if I pull the screen gain out, it basically lets the green come back into the shot. Screen gain can work pretty well. We can punch it up a little bit, but usually what I use to get rid of any kind of detail that might be remaining in the shot is the screen matte. So if you set your view to screen matte, it gives you the matte that it's actually using to generate the key. And you can see that we're, you know, because I'm an idiot and we're green to a green screen shooting day, there's a lot of detail still inside of my person, which we're going to have to deal with, which is good because it's the actual right way to do chroma key. All right, so we've got the screen matte up. So generally what I do with screen matte is I just like to go into that screen matte setting. So you can see we got screen gain, screen balance, which I think helps kind of like reduce some noise and things like that inside of the matte. You got despill bias and alpha bias. That's not something that I ever really change. It's set to 50% gray from the factory. Leaving it there has never really harmed anything that I've done. Screen pre-blur can actually work pretty well to kind of take some of the graininess out of the green screen if you're working on things. I'm going to just leave that set at 0 for now. And then you've got your screen matte, which is really where most of the magic happens inside of Keylight. So let's just do a couple things straight away. Let's clip the black a little bit. So the idea being that you want to manipulate these parameters as little as possible to get the cleanest key you possibly can. So we really want to only clip as much as we need to. The less those numbers are, the better. And the other thing to note is we are going to go in here and roto around this character just in a rough capacity. so that we get rid of as much of the extraneous footage as possible so that we don't even have to worry about it. So when you're clipping, you should be thinking about, okay, what am I going to mask out? So like all this stuff over on the left-hand side, like these, you know, little wrinkles and things in the green screen, we don't need to worry about those when we're clipping. Down here on the bottom, maybe a little bit. So I would really only clip this far enough so that we can get rid of, and I'm going to shut the lights off so you can actually see what the hell is happening. Okay, so yeah, I'm only going to clip as much as I need to get it clean within the vicinity directly around my character. Right, so over here in the lower right-hand corner, kind of next to me, we still got a little bit of noise right there. So I'm going to push the clip just far enough so that noise is gone, and then I'm going to leave it. And I'm going to do the same thing with the white. So I'm going to clip white, and I'm just going to push it. I'm not going to push this too far. I think I'm going to stay at like 85, so it gets rid of most of the noise inside of the subject. But we're going to use masks to bring all that back so that we've got a nice clean image to work with when we're finished. Everybody still with me? All right, so then if we change our view and we go back to final result, we should be seeing a pretty clean image. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of like, once we get the masks put in and it's rotoed, then we're going to go back in and we're going to tweak this some more. So what are some things that give away a keyed shot? Like, what are things that you guys pick out when you're watching visual effects that you can go, oh, that's definitely green screened? Like, what do you see?
Cosmetically, the different color temperatures of the background and the foreground.
Okay, so color matching, that's going to be important.
How crisp the subject is compared to the actual background.
Yes, right? So when you key, especially really high resolution footage, you're going to get this just like overly sharp edge around what you're clean or what you're keying out, right? So if I zoom in on this and I'm looking at full resolution, you can see that this edge is pretty sharp, like right around here underneath. Pretty sharp, which is good, but it might be too sharp, right? So there's some softening and things like that that we can do with the keys. Like you can come in here and say screen softness and maybe set that to 1, and it's just gonna blur those edges a little bit so that they're not so crisp and sharp and they look a little bit more natural. Again, it's one of those things you like, all this is like subtlety and little tweaks go a long way. Like you don't want to do big things because you just ruin everything. Like if I set screen softness to 10, it just fuzzes out the edges, and then it's going to look very keyed, right? So I'm just going to set that back to 1 and leave it at 1 for now. We can go back in and tweak it a little bit more later.
That's one thing I forgot to do.
All right. So in terms of workflow, getting a general key is kind of where you want to start, right? There's some issues with this. We got to get rid of the stuff on the left-hand side. Obviously, we got to get rid of the tracking markers. That's going to come into play. We got to do our spill reduction when we get to the right time. But now comes the kind of annoying part of green screen keying. So whenever you do key work, you almost always want to use an inside mask and an outside mask on your subject, right? So that you can take whatever detail is inherent in the shot originally and leave it there. So the idea is you want to destroy as little data from the original footage as possible when you're keying. Ideally, what would happen is we would only key the edge of the subject. That's it. Everything else would be the original footage masked. And that's kind of where we want to take this. So what we need to do now is we kind of need to rotoscope around my character and get rid of as much of the crap on the outsides of the image as possible. But what's wonderful about this footage is that I'm like bending and twisting and leaning and moving all over the place. So there's going to be some roto work that has to happen to make this look right. So let's kind of like start. I think we're going to start at like the worst part and move forward. And there is, there's more than one right way to do this. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here, where I'm bent over, but the wrench is up in the frame so that we can go around all that stuff. And then as we move forward and we roto this out, we have enough points to work with and everything's going to kind of work in the end. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to get into the pen tool and we're going to start creating masks. So I'm going to click on my chopper footage. I'm going to grab my pen tool and we're going to start creating the rotoscope around this character. I'm going to start kind of off the screen in the corner and make sure you leave yourself plenty of points to work with. You don't want to go click, 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 click around the whole doggone thing and just do a bunch of straight points. Use the click and drag feature where you get handles and curves, because it's going to help you when you start animating this mask over time to make this cleaner. The other thing that you can do is right now, of course, After Effects in its infinite wisdom picked a mask color that is nearly impossible for me to differentiate on the screen. So let's change that straight away. So go into your mask and you can see that it's got the color pink right next to it, which is perfect for seeing on transparency. And let's set that to a nice, bright, wicked color that you can pick out on black or white or any color. I like bright, bright, god-awful red. Okay, so I'm going to go in and I'm just going to continue masking around this character. And you can see that I'm clicking and dragging using the pen tool to kind of create nice smooth curves. And just, you know, not a million points, but give yourself enough points or vertices to work with. As my body changes shape, we're going to need to change the shape of mask over time, and we need enough points to work with. If you run out of points, you kind of got to go in and muck around with it and make it work, and it kind of sucks. So I tend to kind of like put enough points in where I feel that I will have enough to make this work. I usually add a few off screen that I could pull back up onto the image to help finish the roto up. So you should have something similar to what you're seeing on my screen right now. So one thing you're going to want to do is, because we're working in 4K, make sure you're set to 25% for zoom and quarter resolution. And that'll help us step through the footage a little faster and do this roto the right way. Y'all with me? Okay. Cool, so I have a mask, and now we need to basically animate this over time to go around my character. Well, I'm going to try one thing that's new to After Effects. Is it has a mask tracker on it now, which is awesome. It may or may not work for this, but we're going to give it a shot and see what happens. So if you go back into the tracker palette, when you have a mask selected, you'll notice that you have tracker options now in every mask that you make. And this is great for rotoscoping. Like, if you're trying to pull an object out of your image, you can just throw a mask around it and track the mask and adjust it over time, and it kind of does a base track for you, which is great. So you don't need to do every single frame independently. I kind of don't think it's going to work very well, but I want to try it anyway to see what's going to happen. So I'm actually going to track backwards, and we'll see if After Effects does the job. And it looks like it might do the trick. So in some instances, I got to go in and adjust a few things. Okay, so in terms of working with the pen tool, we've done a little bit of this, but when you start doing rotoscoping work, you really need to understand how the pen tool works, right? So right now, the whole mask is selected, and I can tell the whole mask is selected because it's bright red and all of the nodes are solid, right? If I was working on just one individual vertex, that one vertex is solid and everything else is open or empty, right? So the way that I did that, your friends are going to be Command, Option, and Shift when you're working with these different tools, right? So if I hit the Command tool, it brings up my little selection arrow and allows me to select different points or multiple points and move them all at the same time. If I hold Option, it allows me to change the vertex type. Like I can change from Bezier, or soft rounded cornered vertexes, to sharp or cornered vertexes by holding the Alt key. So you can change the type of vertices over time as well to kind of help you through the roto. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of adjust things a little bit, and I'm going to keep using that track feature to track my rotoscope over time.
What was the track feature again?
So if you go over to the tracker palette, it will help you track the mask over time, so you don't have to do quite as much work, which is really nice. And obviously I still need to do a little work, like my wrench just totally left the mask right there. So it's not going to be perfect, but it will definitely help. So again, I'm just clicking, I'm going frame by frame because it's not perfect, and just adjusting the roto as I go. Okay, looking good, looking good. There, my wrench left the screen a little bit. The other thing to keep in mind is when you're doing these rotos, make sure you leave a little space between the character and the edge of the character and the roto, because what we're going to do is we're going to feather this. If it looks funky or we see any weird detail or anything like that that shows up or pops in, we can feather the edge and kind of soften it a little bit, and it can help things out. So just keep a little space between your character and the mask. Alright, so I kind of got that first part done, and now I'm just going to keep stepping forward. And like I said, this is kind of the crappy part of this process, but this is really what makes for great green screen keying. You go through all these steps and do it the right way, and your stuff's going to look way better than it would if you just drop key light on there and call it good. I'm going to pause. So I just told everybody in class except the lecture that was recording that in order to expedite this process a little bit, you can move forward in, say, 12 frame chunks or second chunks and kind of set up your mask so that it goes around your character and you can kind of speed things up a little bit that way, which is nice.
Would you then have to repress like the analyze backwards button or whatever?
You can. I'm only going to use that in certain instances. So basically, whenever I move this mask, it creates a keyframe, right? Yeah, make sure that you are indeed creating keyframes on your mask. Otherwise, you're going to be really sad.
I have done that multiple times.
And I have done that multiple times as well.
So you're saying, so if you go 12 frames, the path will warp, like will animate to that.
Exactly. That's exactly right, David. I have got a lot of extra points right now, so I'm just kind of dragging them off to the bottom of the screen in case I need them later. The other thing to just keep in mind here too is, like, try not to be your worst enemy and be a perfectionist. This is one of those instances where close is going to be pretty much good enough. The only thing you just want to make sure of is you're not cutting chunks of your character off. So I'm again just gonna kind of move forward here and manipulate my mask so that it fits my character. I'm gonna kind of like grab big chunks of keyframes now and just work this as quickly as I can, but as accurately as I can. Okay, I was looking pretty good. I'm gonna move another half second forward.
pretty quick after that first.
Yeah, the motion is what stinks. Like if people are standing still or not moving too much, then it's really not that bad.
So if like so some of the blue trackers, like your hand goes over it.
Yep.
And so like the blue tracker can partially see it. Are you using the pen tool to precisely like?
No, I'm gonna the ones that I'm moving in and out of. I'm gonna use an additional key light to key those out. Obviously, the mask is gonna help because it's gonna get rid of all the ones that you can't see outside of the character. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing here, is to just get rid of as much of the stuff we don't need as possible, so that like the blue keyer is only doing the little annoying ones that pass through the body. I'm moving big 12 frame chunks now again. Just kind of moving forward, making sure everything looks good, is relatively accurate. Yeah, much easier now that I'm not moving around a lot. I think a trick, if you need to select the whole mask, I think the trick is, let me see if I can remember how to do this. I think if you shift, nope, that allows you to transform it. Oh, what the heck is that button? I forget. Okay, if you hold the Alt key and you click on one of the vertices, it will select all of them, which is kind of a nice way to just quickly select the whole mask and move it around, holding the Alt key and clicking on one of the nodes. Whoops. What's up, dude?
They're uploaded.
Cool.
So I just had the third video that I'll finish up tomorrow.
All right, great.
So hopefully that will be done by the end of tomorrow.
Cool.
I know this sounds stupid. Is there a way to change the color of that from red to a different color?
Yeah, you can just double click the little swatch and it'll pull up the color picker and you can change it to whatever color you like.
Oh, okay. Mine's pink and I can barely see it.
Yup. Change that bad boy. So I've kind of gotten through most of this, and it's in pretty good shape.
How do you pick up the whole thing again?
You can hit Alt and click anywhere on the mask, and it will select the whole mask, and then you can grab it and move it around. To teach them the right way to do it. To teach them the Elijah way to do it.
Key those out, bro.
Yep, we're gonna key that out once we're kind of going in and just doing the like shitty part of this right now.
See, even though you.
I got another question.
Shoot.
So, what's the benefit of using the roto brush?
Roto brush can be very beneficial, but it's incredibly time and computer intensive.
Okay.
The benefit of using the roto brush is if you didn't shoot on a green screen and you wanted to isolate a subject from the background, you can use the roto brush to do that.
Okay.
I have been using the roto brush a lot on this cruddy blue screen footage that I was telling you about, because The footage was basically so crappy that I couldn't pull a key that was clean. Like, tons of noise inside the character. I basically have to do this method on everything that I key. And then I will use the rotobrush for edges. So I go in and rotobrush around the character, and rotobrush does a really good job with edges. Hair, any kind of frizzy stuff on the edge of a character, it does a really great job with that. But it's very processor intensive, and the way in which you use it is kind of convoluted. So I like to try to minimize my rotobrushing as much as possible.
Yeah.
But it can be very useful.
Your wrench is getting cut off.
We will also go over the rotobrush in this class.
Something to look forward to, right?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I've used it a few times very, very effectively. And other times I've used it just out of pure necessity. And when you have to use it out of pure necessity, it's a lot less fun. Okay, so ideally, you should have something like this after you are done.
2, 3, 4, 4.
So now I'm playing this back, looking at it, make sure I don't see any edges being cut off, any funkiness happening in here at all.
Two, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Looks pretty good.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, cool.
2,
How are you guys doing?
3,
Are you there?
4, 5, 6.
Okay, no worries. We're going to push on. This is really just, I mean, obviously you guys aren't going to use this shot, but this is just to kind of give you the workflow in terms of how you properly key something. And this seems like, why the hell would I have to do this? You do this because this is how you make stuff look better than everybody else's crap.
Garbage mats.
Yep, garbage mats, exactly. All right, so we got the outside done. Now we need to do the inside. And unfortunately, we need to do the inside on me because I'm wearing green. If I wasn't wearing green, we could probably pass it because it is a pretty solid key. Like if we look at this in the screen mat mode, what we're kind of looking for is any gray detail inside. Like you can see this right here. This is going to be an issue. You'll see through that. You'll see the background through that. And you don't want that. That's badness. It's actually not terrible. Keying this footage is so much better than keying that FS7 stuff. It's so much better. Oh man, I should show you the nightmare of the FS7 footage right now. Let's see if I can pull this up.
That's on you.
If I can log into my Facebook is the
It's on
question.
Vimeo.
Damn it. Ah, hell.
Isn't there a version?
What?
Isn't there a version on Vimeo?
No. I'm talking about like the actual noise in the key that I had to work with I'm trying to remember who the hell I sent it to.
Come on.
Oh, I sent it to Avi, that's right. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? We're having long conversations. Oh, here it is.
Can airdrop it to yourself.
That's what I'm going to do. Oh, shit. All right, I'm just going to walk around and show you this real quick. So this is FS7 footage of stuff that we shot for short. And this is with key light just directly applied to it. See all the noise inside there? See this, Perry? See all that noise inside the image? This is the nightmare. I'm not kidding you. Every visual effects person's nightmare is this, what you're seeing right now. See the noise? All the noise inside that image. So every single shot that I'm working on for this project needs to go through this garbage mat, inside, outside masks, roto brush, pretty much everything that I can do that's not key light to pull a clean key on this footage that was shot on a frickin' blue screen with a crappy Kodak camera. Just, yeah, that face. That's the perfect face, Clay. This is what you never want to see. Never want to see that. Right? Awful. Awful. When I put key light on this footage the first time, I just about puked. Because I knew I was going to just have so much freaking roto work to do. It wasn't even funny. And you know, so this camera shoots a much more robust codec, and you can see just from the mat, it's so much cleaner. I wish we would have shot on my damn camera.
Oh, did you just pull up?
I pulled up the FS7 footage. Okay. So we're pretty close. It's 8:46. We're nearly done. I'm going to let this kind of fly for now. So the next part of this would be we'd do an inside mask. We'd go around and we'd try to like basically do as clean of a mask inside as we can around the whole character. There's a couple of things that you can do to kind of speed this process up. One of those, like trying to do what we did with this garbage mat on the outside is can be a little bit daunting if you're trying to do it with arms and stuff moving around inside the image. So one of the things I would suggest is breaking these masks into multiple pieces, right? So that would look something like this. So I'm just going to go to the source footage, and I'm going to turn my masks off for right now. So if I were to say do the inside masking on this, I'd kind of do it in chunks, right? And by chunks, I'd mean something like a torso mask, where I come in here and just kind of make a nice clean mask around the torso, and hopefully that arm doesn't stick out. I don't remember if it does or not. So a mask like that, and I'm just going to shut all these masks off. I'm going to set them to none. And then you can break up anything that moves, like the arm. You kind of do the arm as its own thing, right? You might even break the arm into multiple pieces. It goes something like this. Go ahead, Cameron.
I've seen a lot of people using Mocha Pro or just Mocha in general do this.
To do roto, yep.
Or like split it exactly what you're doing.
Mocha can work really well for this too because it's got that mask tracking, but that's the same thing. I mean, you can kind of track these masks as well. So you come in here and kind of make multiple masks and do it, you know, per mask. Rather than trying to make one giant mask and make it work for everything, you kind of go in and do smaller masks. And break the work down a little bit so that it's not so daunting to try to make one big one move the whole way. And when we do Mocha AE, Cameron, we'll cover that kind of roto workflow a little bit so that you guys can learn about it, because that can be really, really helpful. So, all right, so let's say we want to start rotoing these different masks. Well, now, because we're working inside the character, the tracker is actually going to work pretty well for this, I think. So I'm just going to kind of play this forward first to draw out the mask on the end, which you can see it did really quickly. And then I'm going to also go backwards. So far it's really working pretty well. So here we lost a little bit right here, but I can kind of stop and back up and adjust a little bit. Got to adjust down here too. And then we'll just play backwards. Looks like we lost a little bit there too, or just back up a little. Yep. Back up a little, pull this in a little. Double check. I think we're still okay. Oops. Still okay. I'm gonna go ahead and just step it backwards. So this is basically what Mocha does, is it uses the planar tracker to track the inside of your character and create masks for you. And it's pretty effective, but you can see you can get a pretty quick result too, just using After Effects stuff built in. So just a little more. I'm just gonna kind of step nice and slow. It looks like I might need to move back here a little bit. Yep. Oops. So it looks like my arm does open up a little bit there. So that it may or may not be a problem. It's almost all black right there, so I don't think we're going to really have to worry too much about it.
Todd, I think I missed the point of doing an inside mask.
So the point of the inside mask is if you do have any noise, like because I'm wearing green, there's gonna be parts where you see through it and see the background if you don't do any of this inside masking. So the kind of the steps from here go like this. Okay, you complete the inside mask, right? Then what you do is you create multiple layers of the roto. So you would have the inside stuff, which would look something like, I'm gonna go back to the end where my masks were kind of in place. So let's say we go through, we do all the rotoing, all the masks are done, they're ready to rock and roll. So then what you do is you do this. You take your image, you duplicate this, and you'd say inside Todd, and then you'd say outside Todd, and then we just use the masks that we need, right? I usually do all my masking on one piece of video and then duplicate it out and then turn the masks on or off that I need or don't need, right? So we know that the only masks we really need here are the inside masks. So we'd come in here and turn on all the inside masks, and then on the outside one, we just turn on the first one we did. So that gives us our green cut right there. If I shut that off, you can see all the inside stuff is nice and clean. We retain all that original information, which is exactly what we want. And in the end, what you end up with is grab that color. A nice, clean image. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my key light and make this the blue key light. So I'm dragging this underneath the spill suppressor, and I'm gonna grab the blue from my little blue markers. You can see that it's showing me all the little blue markers, which is perfect. Go into my screen mat. I'm gonna grow it by 1 pixel so that it's just pulling the blue, and we should be in a pretty good spot. And it looks like it needs just a little bit more. You can see it right there. If I go to full resolution, you can see there's just a halo of that blue marker there. I'm gonna see if I can't clip that out. This might be a good spot to take the softness out, because we don't really need that to be soft. We just need it to be gone. And then you can expand or grow in this instance, and that is pretty freaking clean right there.
So the inside mask doesn't have the key light effect applied to it, or it does?
It doesn't.
Okay. It's just there to make sure that it's okay.
Right, and honestly, I would probably come in here and just delete this out. You may want to run spill suppression, but unfortunately what spill suppressor is going to do here is it's just going to change the color of my jumper, right? So I don't really need anything here. this is where kind of what learning next week about how to light properly for green screen is really important. Like, you want to really minimize the amount of spill on your character as much as humanly possible, especially if you're dealing with anything shiny. Swords, armor, anything like that you put in front of a green screen is just going to give you tons of spill, and then you're going to have more nightmarish stuff to deal with. But this is the ideal right here. Something nice and clean that you can drop a background image behind. I'm going to just see if I can find something really quick. Oh, there's probably some skylines in here. Perfect. Okay. So throw the skyline back there and you can see it's a nice clean key. Looks good. The lighting works. That's the ideal right there. And depending on how well it clips or cleans, you can kind of forego some things. Like, you don't necessarily have to do an inside mask all the time, but it's a really good idea to always do that outside mask at the very minimum. And in some instances, feathering those masks too will help. Obviously, I can't watch this in motion. Well, I suppose I kind of could. I could just delete this. Oops, delete this or shut this off. Play this back and see how this looks.
2, 3, 2.
So there's still a little ghosting around the edges over here, and that's really because of the motion blur. And we can fix that to a certain degree by going back into the Keylight software and playing around with it a little bit. So right now you can see that with the screen matting, there's this thing called replace method, and it says soft color. If I change this to source, it might deaden up some of that garbage a little bit. The other thing that you can do is, I think you can say replace color. You can replace that with, say, like the background color, which can help with any of those areas where there's blurs or it's gray or whatever. That can help there too. I'm going to set that back. Let me see if I say soft color. Okay, that didn't really help. Let me see. I might shrink this just ever so slightly. Very good, very good. That is actually pretty good. Go ahead, Cameron.
Could you use
2,
matte choker too?
3, 2, 3.
Yep,
2,
you can choke the
3.
mat back. You don't want to go too far, and that is honestly what these things do right here, is it helps you choke the mat down. You basically, at this point, it's tweaking, right? So it's going in, and every shot's going to be different. Going in, playing with the clips, the softness. D-spot black and white are pretty weird. I wouldn't play with those too much. You can also do like edge color correction. So edge color correction, when you enable that, can help get rid of some of the weird motion blur artifacts that you're seeing in there. That also really helps with suppression, so spill suppression stuff. So ideally on green screen, when you're not shooting with like super duper high quality cameras like uncompressed red raw codecs or anything like that, there are just going to inherently be some issues. Like, you're going to see a little bit of this ghosting if you have motion and motion blur in your shots. There are going to be parts of things like the eye hole on this wrench that's kind of disappearing right now. Some of that stuff is just going to go away. It's the nature of the beast. Unless you get in there with a mask and go in and mask around the eyelet for every time it moves, like, that's really the only way to bring some of this back. So you kind of have to, like, when you're doing green screen, you kind of have to go, okay, how important is that this be absolutely perfect, right? If it's a film, probably pretty important, right? If it's a commercial that you need to turn in a couple days, less important. It just needs to be passable, because most likely the shots are going to be fast. You can minimize the amount of movement that you're using inside of them. So, like, you don't really want to shoot stuff on green screen of, like, say, like doing jumping jacks, where you're like flailing your arms all over the place and you got a lot of motion blur and you want it to look decent. Well, then you're going to have issues. You can do some things to shoot around it, like you can increase your shutter speed so that you get really sharp edges on everything, like 120th of a second instead of 150th of a second, to help minimize that like motion blur that you see when you move things around inside the frame. So there's all kinds of little tricks and tips and things like that that you can do to kind of help your keys look good. Shooting and lighting properly are the biggest ones. So separating your subject from the green screen, making sure that your ratio of lighting is the same on both your subject and the background. Making sure your green screen isn't too bright. That's a big one. Like if the chroma is too bright, it won't pull a good key. I've noticed in the past that I see a lot better key pulls on backgrounds that are darker rather than lighter. Shooting a camera with a good quality codec is really going to be your saving grace. Like on a 5D or a T2i or whatever, yeah, you can get by with it. It's really not ideal because those are heavily compressed codecs, and you lose a lot of data just from the camera processing the footage and putting it on the card. So shooting with a quality that puts out shooting with a camera that puts out a good quality codec is going to be important to pulling a good clean key. And this could still use work. It looks pretty sharp around the edges, so I would probably soften the edges a little bit. Try to pull the key in maybe a little bit. Animate the key at the beginning where there's motion and you can see like the gray edging around things. So little tweaks like that will really help push the keys and make them look good. So now do you see how we can spend 8 weeks on this?
Yeah.
Couple hours for one shot. All right, I'm gonna cut you guys loose.
3, 4,
so
5.
meet with your
6,
groups this week. Talk concepts,
2,
right? So ideally
3,
for next week, what
4,
I'd love is that
5,
you come to the table with a
6.
solid concept, maybe two,
2,
and you
3,
all have consensus on these,
5,
right? So you need to
6.
like pick a concept as a group and decide
2,
as a group
3,
that that's what you're going to do.
4,
If you want to take some
5,
time tonight, I'll stick
6.
around as long as you guys want to. If you want to talk
2,
to me about your concept
3,
ideas
4,
or what you want to
5,
do, I'm here.
6.
I'm not going to go anywhere for the next hour. So
2,
use
3,
me. I'm here.
4,
Otherwise,
5,
you're free.
6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.